using them to shape and develop your post-16 setting. Today, we'll be looking at developing self-evaluation process, using self-evaluation to inform effective development then planning and modelling effective development planning. Then we'll have a little break where we'll go on for the second half to look at learner voice and then developing effective collaboration with managers and school staff, including managing challenging conversations, which I'm sure a number of you have had over the years, and maybe as you try and look at change might come in front of you, so that could be handy in order to plan for future changes. There's a colleague that those of you who attended the South Aberystwyth, Abertawe and Swansea might not have met, and that'll be Mary Roberts from Gware. She'll be doing the second session, but we'll be starting off with Emma. So over to you, Emma. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm just going to move that slide on. Okay, so I'm going to look at self-evaluation as our first session this morning. So again, thank you for joining us. We're going to look at understanding the importance of the process of self-evaluation in post-16 settings to raise standards, identifying the range of evidence that you can gather or that is available to you to support your self-evaluation. And then I'm going to familiarise you with a new resource from Welsh Government, so the National Resource for Evaluation Improvement, which some of you may have been aware of was launched in May. So that's the overview of what we're going to be looking at. But before we start, we're just going to use the chat straight away. Just want to get a feel in the room, well, the virtual room, of how confident you are with self-evaluation. So is this something completely new to you in terms of doing your self-evaluation to inform your development planning or improvement planning, you might call it in your setting, or is it something that you've been doing for quite some time, you're quite confident with? So if you are new to self-evaluation and development planning, could you put a 1 in the chat, and then on a scale up to 5, if you're pretty confident with it, could you put a 5 in the chat? So I'll just give you a minute or two there, please, to share that in the chat. Just get a feel in the room for how confident we are with self-evaluation. Yeah, always a challenge. I agree with that. It seems to change and the goalposts change. So quite a lot of people new, some confident and have been working hard there on that, and obviously a lot of people there may be more new to post, putting the lower scores there. So a real mix in the room. So thank you, everybody. That's great. That's good for us to know maybe the level of support you might need from us, and feel free to do that following the session today if that's what's needed. Okay. So quick little starter. Again, we're going to use the chat to do that. So what does the term self-evaluation mean to you? So sorry, I'm getting to work hard this morning. So what does the term self-evaluation mean to you? And what is the purpose of self-evaluation in your school or college or sixth form setting? Just reflect on those questions just for a minute or two, and feel free then to pop into the chat what those two questions mean to you, please. The answers starting to come in. We'll reflect on those. Reflect on the current practices to steer improvement. Absolutely. So reflecting backwards, look at improvement, and again, reflecting to inform effective improvement. So good putting the word effective in there. Looking at your processes, looking at the actions that you undertake, and not just yourself, your team. Really important point there, that it's a team effort. It's not all down to you on your own. Reflection, review, reflect, set goals, set targets, look at wider goals. Some great answers coming in here. What's happening? What needs to change to be more effective? To help create our action plan or development plan, some may call it improvement plan. Target setting. Brilliant. We've all got the idea. We all know what it is. We're all doing it, living it, breathing it. However confident we are, we know that. So we're reflecting on our current practice to look at improvement. And if we can, going forward, start thinking about when we're doing that self-evaluation and we are reflecting, are we linking it to those 5 inspection areas that we looked at in the first session? Are we looking at learning, well-being, attitudes to learning, teaching, learning experiences, leadership, management, all those things that underpin those 5 areas? So all the time reflecting back when we are self-evaluating on those. Okay, so the purpose, I think we've picked up most of the things there. Don't think we maybe said improving standards in teaching and learning. So that's another thing that should be on your radar when you're looking at your self-evaluation. Are we looking to improve standards of teaching and learning? So does that mean you being more involved on a subject level, not just on a pastoral level? And another thing, we always forget about ourselves. So our self-evaluation should also help us to plan our own professional learning. So if we're evaluating and we're putting that as our self-evaluation, that there's a gap in our own professional learning, and you're already identifying that because you're on this course and you're learning, so that's fantastic. But that's an opportunity to look at where you need to go with your own professional learning and flag that to your senior leadership team to make time and space to make those improvements within your school, college or setting. It's all about, isn't it, building capacity to manage change and having time to do that, but also aligning with our self-improving system. So our schools as learning organisations, we want to be self-improving. We want to be looking after our own professional development. We want to be really reflective and evaluative so that we can improve within. And that doesn't mean that we just don't collaborate with anybody else. The strength of collaboration is also really, really vital, isn't it, in improving our own settings. So what have a few people said about self-evaluation? You can see here on the screen the National College of Teaching and Leadership. This is from 2018. I'll give you a second to read that, but they are focusing on self-evaluation is looking at your strengths. And I think we always think about improvement, but sometimes we need to give ourselves a tap on the back as well and make sure we are highlighting and celebrating what we do really, really well. It talks about improving quality and provision for learners, learner always being at the centre of everything that we do. And I think as you go down to the bottom there, it is reflective, systematic, analytical process. And you've said already that it's reflective and identify the best way forward for pupils. So just give you a chance. I've been rabbiting on there to have a read of that yourself. Okay, we've got a second one here, our favourite people, Estin. I've had a little go at telling us what they think self-evaluation is as well. So self-evaluation and improvement processes should be integral and ongoing feature to work in all schools. It's a constructive process and it should be a positive process to celebrate all the work that you do in order to improve for the future. And it needs to be embedded into the culture and embraced by all staff. So again, not something that is just done sporadically. It's really embedded within our system and it's revisited and reviewed as we go through. Okay, and that's by all staff. So right from TAs all the way through to teaching staff, all the way through to the leadership team are part of the self-evaluation process. Okay, certainly not a one-off paperwork event. Okay, and then an excellent document here, which I'm going to share in the chat in a moment, is our School Improvement Guidance Framework for Evaluation, Improvement and Accountability. We're not going to focus so much on the accountability side. We're going to certainly look at the evaluation and improvement. So it says that the energy and focus in the system should be on delivering school improvement, guided by effective self-evaluation in improvement planning or development planning. And it says there that school leaders should have the support and confidence to learn and improve their practice continually. And it's that word again, isn't it? Continually. So our self-evaluation isn't something that's done once. It's not picked up at end of the summer, autumn term, and then put in a drawer. It goes in your back pocket. It lives with you and it moves with you as the year goes on, and we revisit and we look how we can continually improve during the year. This enables then people to thrive. So again, that support of senior leadership teams, support of external bodies to help you with your self-evaluation, and also a collaborative environment. So again, working collaboratively within school. So your internal collaboration and externally as well. So who can you collaborate externally within your cluster of schools maybe, or outside of that cluster to support your priorities going forward? And again, the learner being the forefront and centre of the statement, okay, with every young person fulfilling their potential. And that's why we're in the job, isn't it? That's why we're in the role and why we want to do that. So I'm just going to open my notes pages second, sorry. Can't get my words out this morning. And I'm going to pop that in the chat. So you probably are aware of this document, but just so you can refer back to it, there is the improvement an accountability framework. And it's very clear now that self-evaluation and improvement fall very separately from accountability. So a process within itself, which is very, very important. Okay. Okay, so straight away, we're going to get you to go out into some breakout rooms, because it is clear that you will know what self-evaluation is, and you're happy with that. So we want to look at the evidence that can be collated in order to successfully undertake self-evaluation. So if you take a little screenshot or a little photo of the screen, so you can take those questions into the chat with you. If I can, I'll try and post them in the chat in the breakout room as well. But we're going to go in for 20 minutes. We want you to look at what evidence can be used. So what can you gather when evaluating your sixth form or college, and what can be learned from that evidence that you're gathering. So if you're saying that you're looking at data, what is that helping you to do? And if you're looking at other forms, maybe I'm just going to give one away, pupil voice, you know, what can you learn from that evidence? And then the second part of that, what self-evaluation currently takes place at post-16 level in your school and college, and how is that used to drive improvement? So what is available? What do you know is out there that can inform your self-evaluation? And then what is currently going on in your setting, and how do you use that information that you gather to drive improvement in your school? So I've given you a little bit of time, hopefully, to get those questions down. And once you get into your group, if you could nominate somebody to feed back to us, that would be absolutely fantastic. And we will come together in 20 minutes time. So if Helen, you could pop everybody into breakout rooms, that would be great. Thank you. So welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed having a chat. Sorry, it wasn't quite the same chat as around the table in Swansea or in North Wales from session 1. I know it's not quite the same, but hopefully you enjoyed catching up with one another. So we had 5 breakout rooms there. From room 1, and that was Delith Hughes' room. Could somebody from that group who you nominated please give your feedback on what evidence can we collate, what current practice was shared that was really positive, and how do we use that information we've gathered to drive improvement? So someone from room 1 please, Delith's room.
Morning Emma, morning all. I think I was in room 1, I think.
Thank you, Chris, brilliant.
So I was nominated to give a bit of feedback this morning. I said we all take it in turns. How many breakout rooms have we got, Emma?
There's 5.
Fantastic. There we go.
Oh, today? 3.
Yes,
3.
today.
Yeah. You got a couple of times. I see what you mean. Yeah, I see what you mean.
So apart from the obvious that you mentioned at the start in terms of data and voice, which are the obvious ones that we would talk about where we collect our evidence. It was nice to hear that we had a bit of a range of experience, but we also had Delith from her school as well, when they've got a very, very different ALN focus, where the pupil voice sometimes can be a more of a long-winded approach for them. For us, for me, it's quite an easy approach. When I started here in June, after being somewhere else for sort of 5 or 6 years, it was the first thing I did, which was the pupil voice to impact, because obviously writing my evaluation this September based on a year that's gone that I wasn't involved in was a little bit more challenging. So pupil voice was my first starting point, and they can give you a very honest and an up-to-date opinion of their experiences, but it has really helped me move forward. So I think we were all in all in agreement that that's really, really important. From data, we talked about data tracking our results. Something that comes up time and time again for me is tracking accuracy, sometimes rather than the final outcome, because you can track your data throughout, but then how accurate were you on your results? And that's something that I know I'm looking for in my school evaluation, and it'll also come on to question 2 in a second. Another thing that popped up as well, whilst we talk about attendance and value added and the key data, was destinations. If we're looking at the consistent performance measures, destinations is a big thing that I look at in terms of moving forward with the evaluation. But I think we were all in agreement that we often don't pat ourselves on the back. We often look at the gaps, and we look at the things we couldn't do or didn't do because of the job and the role, and we sometimes beat ourselves up with that rather than looking at the really successful things that came from it. And then lastly, then the second question, which looks at what we're currently doing. Well, it was all clear that we were all currently linking in with our school improvement plan and the whole school SCR. So that's something that is common. Something we do here is, I think most schools have an objective that they want to extend and reach out across all key stages, and I think it's really important where we can to include the sixth form in that approach as well, because sometimes the sixth form, as we discussed when we were in Swansea, can sometimes feel like a bit of an add-on, and it's certainly not. And I think we've got to work hard to ensure that we have that consistent approach, whether that is a literacy focus or maybe a DCF focus or an exam technique focus, that it works right the way through the school.
That's a really interesting point, isn't it? And something I think that has been highlighted over and over, and is becoming more and more important. That inclusive kind of whole school approach and being part of that is becoming more apparent and more important, isn't it, as we progress through, and certainly with new curriculum coming through as well. So really good point, Chris. Great. And I really like the point about the tracking accuracy, because that's really important, isn't it? We can track all year and feedback, but if it doesn't look anything like the end result and the picture we get in the summer when we look at those results, then we need to evaluate that, don't we, and go back and look at our process and work with our subjects to make sure that self-evaluation and improvement planning is impactful, isn't it?
Yeah, agree.
Brilliant. Okay, that's great. Thank you. And room 2, I think that was Greg Leslie's room. And nomination from there, please. Hopefully.
Right then. Yeah, no,
I'm
here.
Thank you.
No, we would just kind of chat it. We from kind of schools and FE, we all seem to have a similar sort of thing. We were saying how important kind of learner voice has become and kind of played into that and getting kind of feedback. So different schools and centres seem to have different ways of doing it, whether it be kind of like a panel of students who seem to meet kind of every other term, or it could be kind of online questionnaires and just the logistics of how to do that. We were also saying kind of the role that maybe the kind of ESTIN inspection framework plays in us kind of feeding into that. And then we were talking a little bit about kind of value added and things like that, what different schools are kind of using now and different systems and things like that.
Yeah, and what was the sort of feel in the room for value added at the moment?
Well, it seems to be, we at in FE, we went from a period of kind of Alps into Alice and now into Alps, and from my point of view, I felt like we joined everybody on Alps, but now we're looking at, is it SMID? That's kind of another one that place has gone to, and so I was like, well, that's interesting, so I'm Googling away now just to kind of find out what that is. I don't necessarily know with kind of value added, it's like different ways of kind of chasing your own tail sometimes. Like it just seems, well, we've got this system, and then we were discussing, kind of the impact I suppose COVID's had, and how accurate is that data now over the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would be nice, isn't it, if there was a consistent approach across schools, FE colleges, for everybody, so you knew that the value added you were looking at and comparing maybe to your like schools or family of schools, was comparable and fair and quite right with CDGs and then adjusted grades through. We are in a time of change still, and that will continue for another couple of years, I think. So that is something we will look at, this very holistic approach to our self-evaluation because of the challenges we faced over the last few years. So that's a really good point. Thank you very much. Brilliant. And room 3, I think that was Paul Francis's room, and it doesn't have to be Paul, whoever was nominated from that room, please.
Is that our room, is it? Is that my room?
Yeah, go
Thank
for
you,
it.
Matt.
I'll speak. Apologies, I was late. There was an incident that's I had to sort out. Yeah, in terms of the first question, I think we're quite similar in terms, obviously, we use data. We discussed, which was used, a couple of us using apps. Just have a quick talk about the apps data. I had a good discussion about how we use the pupils sort of voice. On similar to Chris, we all really valued that. We had slightly different approaches. Some doing sort of questionnaires, try and get an idea of obviously what's going on. We discuss if it's Alan, we do some we send some questionnaires, but we also do an activity. So as part of the self-evaluation plan, we go in pick 6 pupils out of a particular subject, and we take them on like a learning journey. So we got a booklet that we go through with them, asking, you know, what's going well in the subject, what needs to be improved on, what ways you like do you learn best, all those type of normal questions. But we have the books from all the subjects, so to get an idea of if they're struggling in this particular subject, what's different to that than the other subjects where they may be, you know, doing really well in. So that gives us a fuller picture of exactly what's happening. Like I say, throughout the year we would go through all of them, all the departments, and I will use throughout the year now, I'll use my pals to, you know, sit with the pupils and to go through the learning journey then. And then last year, I know, speaking to myself, led some difficult conversation with departments, but ultimately it was for the better the pupil outcomes. So, you know, we talk about managing those conversations and obviously discussing in a way where you're really supportive and trying to ask them, you know, what type of things they like to do, what do you think sport they need to move it on. We also linked it to ALPS then in terms of how you can, you know, quite easily using the what if function and the thermometer ad hoc, you can see if they need to go up, say from a blue to a black. You just slide it up on the side and it tells you exactly how many pupils need to improve. So I talk about if certain ones that improve, hitting their targets in other subjects, like targeting easy wins and supporting them with that. We also talk about action plans. So here we get them to send action plans. So after each data drop, after every 6 weeks, I send an email to all the heads of department and ask them for their plans in terms of what strategies they're going to do with who are the at-risk pupils. So they will send me a plan, and then I monitor that plan to obviously go in, seeing lessons, speaking to pupils. Are they actually catching that plan? And the plan could be anything from, you know, extra revision sessions, one-to-one mentoring, PPs after school, everything that's in there to sort of close the gap, really.
Oh, that's fantastic. You know, that's a really targeted intervention, isn't it, to support that? And it's quite interesting to hear that a lot of us are already going back to our data, aren't they? In terms of, we're saying learner voice and data are the two things that are coming through. But it's nice that you've got that connection with the subjects, and that is a clear accountability, and not just on you to look at the end result, but to have that ongoing dialogue to improve standards of your learners and teaching and learning, I suppose, at the same time.
Yeah, we spoke about, like, ultimately it's going to be difficult for us to go in and tell like an RE teacher or a maths teacher how to make them better, because ultimately they've got the skill set to do that. But it's like we just talked about, it's up to us to sort of support them and just make sure they are putting those strategies in place, rather than saying, yeah, I'm targeted, I'm doing something, but what is it they're actually doing? So then when I go into my meetings with sort of senior management, I can say, look, these are underperforming, but this is what they are doing. So they know that I've been having those discussions. And then the ones who are sort of struggling, I meet with them as well. So they don't just send me an email, I will meet with them and discuss those underperforming targets. Pupils,
That's great. Thanks, Matt. Great. I'm aware of time, so I'll move on. I'm sure we could talk about lots of things there. Thank you very much. Room 4, Rian, just a quick overview maybe of anything that hasn't come up yet. So from Rian James's group.
I think everyone's said everything really that we've had down on paper.
Yeah.
With regards to the first question, we spoke a lot about data collecting, the ALPS, the SMID, different tracking systems across the schools, which was quite interesting to hear others and what they're doing. Pupil voice was really important to us as well, either through Google Form, meeting face to face, having that honest conversation with the pupils. It can be a bit death by Google Form at times with the children, so it's good to do it different ways. Again, the destinations, lesson observations, and learning walks as well. And questionnaires for parents, you know, for them to have their say as well, and to know, as someone said earlier, that we're doing an okay job, and a pat on the back as well.
Brilliant. And thank you so much, because you brought some of those broader ways of looking and feeding self-evaluation that we're hoping would come from the discussion. So there's some really interesting points there, and really important that we get that breadth of information coming in. And thank you very much. And Sian's group, Sian Waters' group, the last group, again, for a quick summary, if there's anything different to add or reflect on, please.
We didn't actually choose a spokesperson. We were too busy chatting, but
well, that's good as well.
So yeah, everything that has come before, really, we looked at all the different types of evidence. Everybody was in a kind of a different stage of leading a sixth form, with it, as far as kind of experience is concerned. So, you know, it was data, but it was also data drops throughout the year, not just in September time. There was, and we spoke about pupil voice, parent voice, the use of ALPS, also use of kind of Educate and things like well-being surveys, so that you can check the well-being, so not just academic progress, but also how the learners are feeling. And then we just talked about sort of the patterns and how we then put intervention into place via what we can see with all that data. You know, so you're using it all to kind of then make your judgment, and then set your priorities for you know, for your future kind of workload, I guess. But yeah, most of what's been said before is what we covered.
Brilliant, and that does cover, doesn't it, all those 5 ESTIN inspection areas, and again, lovely to see that the consideration of well-being coming into that conversation as well, which is great. Okay, just moving on. That's a wonderful feedback. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your discussions. There's a very small summary of things, and that I would hope you'd come out with, and we did. We got there in the end. We were quite data heavy, and that's flipped on its head actually from last year, where everybody was, oh, there's no data, so we had to think of other things. So don't forget the other aspects of self-evaluation that are really important. Are you doing the learning walks as a post-16 lead, or is that just someone feeding back to you? Is that something you need to do? Are you involved in book looks? Do you speak with the heads department regularly? You know, lesson observations, are you part of that, or is that information that's fed back to you? How does that work within your school, college, or setting? You've all talked about focus group interviews, pupil voice, and it's really interesting to hear pupil voice not just being a Google form, because sometimes that is just filled out and you don't get the depth of knowledge. So having those focus groups and conversations and follow-up mentoring, really important. And we've talked about destinations because we know we've got our performance measures, which will start to come back into play in terms of looking and evaluating our provision. So really comprehensive answers. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on swiftly, because I always go over time. I'm very good at that. Okay, so this is our last part. This is our national resource for evaluation and improvement. Can you just pop in the chat very quickly? How many of you have seen this document, saw the launch video maybe in May? Are we aware of this, or is this something completely new to you? So the National Resource for Evaluation and Improvement from Welsh Government, pop in the chat very quickly. Yes, if you're aware of it. No, if you've never seen or heard of it, just so I know where I'm pitching this. Well, great. I'm glad I've brought you something new. I'm seeing lots of no's going there. That's wonderful. Not so wonderful that you haven't seen it, but great that I can point you in the right direction. So this is a great resource, and the links are in the PowerPoint. I won't show you everything today. There's certainly something you can spend a little bit of time on, and it is really useful. It is used on a whole school level, but can be very easily adapted to use with post-16. So it's a resource that has been in response to ESTIN. They identified that self-evaluation needed improvement within schools. So Welsh Government linked together with schools, consortia, local authorities, OECD, and they've developed a resource online that supports self-evaluation and then obviously your development and improvement planning. So they say it's statutory from September 22. I think it's a very gentle embedding into that, but it's got a range of resources to support you that you can use as a menu. So it's by no means a tick list of everything you've got to answer and have at your fingertips if someone were to visit you or in a leadership meeting, but it certainly guides you in the right direction to support your self-evaluation. It supports all the new initiatives in terms of Curriculum for Wales, qualification reform, professional teaching standards, professional learning journey, national approach to professional learning, schools as learning organisations, everything that's new to our world in education, all these new reforms that have come in have been considered when this was put together. So really powerful. So the link is there. It'll take you directly to the website. If you look then at the structure, it goes into sort of 4 layers. So it looks at questions you can ask in terms of completing your self-evaluation in terms of leadership. So your leadership of the sixth form. So you might just have to tally it because it's whole school, but look at it as post-16. Curriculum offer. So looking at your curriculum, your learning and teaching within your sixth form setting, and then wellbeing, equity and inclusion. So it's got these 4 areas, and within that there are a series of questions. And you can see there at the bottom there's a link to self-evaluation prompts. And that's a really nice PDF that you can keep zooming into It'll take you straight to that page, and it'll ask you a question about how well do learners do something on any of those areas, and then it'll drill down the further questions you might be asking to make sure that if you were quizzed about well-being within your setting, you've got the right evidence at your fingertips. So I know I've gone very, very quickly there, and I've run out of time to show you, but a really excellent resource to support your self-evaluation going forwards, and to help you drill down and ask those questions that are really going to give you the answers you need to show your strengths and to identify the areas of development within your centre. It sort of supports really robust inquiry-based evaluation as well. So if you're doing any sort of MPEP or inquiry work, that is really supported within this document as well. It will certainly help you feed into the whole school development plan and put post 16 on the map. So I will put these in the chat as well so that you've got them there. I've got them in notes. I'll pop those in a moment because I'm aware I'm running over time. Thank you for all your feedback. And there's just a slide there to look at self-evaluation is most effective when it's concise and uses evaluative terminology. And I'll just pop in as well in the chat for you the Estin writing guide, because it's really useful actually to see those words and how they write evaluatively, and can you reflect that in your self-evaluation so you're speaking in the same language there as they are, and that it's continuous. We've talked about self-evaluation not being a one-off document. It's something that is revisited throughout the year. It's iterative, it can change and it can evolve as you go through the year. It's reflective, as you all said right at the beginning. It's very honest. There's no point in saying we're brilliant at this, and this, but you've got no evidence for it. These are our strengths, and as Chris said, remember to celebrate them because you're all working really, really hard, but it's honest in terms of your areas for development, and it's very inclusive across every learner within your setting. Wide range of evidence, as we said. Don't go back to just being crunching the data and worrying about that. Keep the pupil voice, the learning walks, the book looks going, and as we said, it's reviewed regularly in order for it to be meaningful and for effective self-evaluation to take place. So hopefully that's given you a nice opportunity to chat about self-evaluation, and it should lend beautifully to Mary's session next, where she's going to look at putting that self-evaluation into development planning, and I will pop all those links into the chat for you now. But thank you very much, everyone, and over to you, Mary.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you. Bore da bawb. Really nice to be here with you this morning. I'm Mary. I'm a Supporting Improvement Advisor with GWE, and I'm going to take you through this next part of today's workshop, which, as Emma says, is going to be based around development planning and really building on what Emma has already talked about this morning. So as you've already heard and already know, development planning is intrinsically linked to the self-evaluation processes that Emma's just been discussing. And as heads of sixth form, post-16 leaders in your settings, you're probably tasked by your head teachers or by your line managers to be preparing and implementing development plans or improvement plans. There's really no difference. Different places use different names for them, but there's a similar process perhaps that we can use when we're preparing these plans and putting them to work. You may very well be experienced and confident to be writing and implementing development plans, and if you are, I hope that the aspects that we look over for the next 40 minutes or so will just consolidate what you already know and what you already do. But if you are new to development planning, hopefully what we provide you with today will steer you, give you some of the key points and also some examples that will be of some help to you, I hope. Okay, so a good place to start perhaps is to make the point that whatever we do and whatever we plan for should have an impact on student outcomes, experiences or provision. And the plan really is to underpin your strategic direction and to support the driving forward of any improvements you want to make. There are things that we're going to be doing day to day, and they're going to be providing different opportunities for pupils and certainly moving things on. Not everything, though, has to be recorded in a development plan. We're going to stick perhaps to the main priorities in these plans when we put them together. And in the same way, we wouldn't perhaps need to record any continuing work or in our development plans. We'd be going for new initiatives, things we want to put in place, but also perhaps further developments and building on what we've already done over the past few years perhaps would be completely relevant. The priorities for our development plans will probably stem them from two possible areas. Firstly, everything that Emma's talked about this morning, everything that you've brought up in your breakout rooms is very pertinent. So what have we learned from any internal data analysis that we've done, outcome analysis, the value added data you were mentioning earlier, destinations data? What have we learned from those that need to be addressed? Something that perhaps we could put in place to make things even better than they already are. And also, of course, findings from lesson observations, learning walks, books or work scrutiny exercises, pupil voice being very strong, as you've all mentioned already this morning. They're all going to help us to decide on our priority or priorities for the coming year and even further along, perhaps. But of course, we also then have to consider any whole school, local, regional or national priorities that we should be mirroring or supporting in our post-16 plans as well. So, for example, Welsh Government's priority to tackle the impact of poverty on attainment is very likely to be on your development plan already this year, I'm sure. Any costings or time or professional learning that might be required should also be considered. And importantly, where possible, try and aim to co-construct the plan. You were talking earlier in your breakout rooms about the importance of working with heads of department and that sometimes perhaps it's not always easy. Involving everyone that has an interest perhaps in the success of that plan's implementation hopefully will mean that you'll be able to achieve the priority that you're putting in place within your plan. Just move on to this one. So there's no right way, there's certainly no one way, there's certainly no particular right ways to be going about recording your development plans or improvement plans. We'll have a look at a template in a few minutes, and I'm sure you're already using a template that suits you and suits your school. Regardless of the way it looks, there are some key aspects that would be considered good practice, perhaps, to have included in our plans. And I've tried to list them for you here on this slide, and we'll talk more about them in our breakout rooms shortly as well. So firstly, the need to be really clear about the priority. What exactly do we want and why do we want it? The reasons, of course, are going to stem from those things we've just been talking about, the self-evaluation findings, school, local, Welsh national priorities and so on. But it's also considered quite highly effective practice to evidence any research that you've undertaken, any research that you want to be able to using, any data perhaps, anything that's relevant should be included in your reasoning here as well and within your priority. Secondly, we should be stating our expected outcomes from implementing the priority and the plan itself. And very often it's helpful here to think about that initial reasoning for the reasons behind this particular priority. And wherever possible, our expected outcomes need to be as specific as possible, clearly need to be achievable, but also where possible measurable. How are we going to know when we've achieved that particular outcome? And the more precise and more specific we can be, the easier perhaps it is to put that plan into place. We're also going to need to consider the steps or the tasks or the actions, whatever you want to call them really, that we're going to need to undertake in order to achieve the priority and the expected outcomes that we want. So ideally, the need to think about how we'll know when these are achieved. They may well need their own success criteria each step, perhaps, so that we know we've achieved it. And we could be using these if we wanted to as milestones to recognise our progress towards achieving the overall priority. So it can be really helpful to break things down into smaller tasks so we can see that we are making a difference in a really busy timetable of things in school to be doing. It's also very good to be clear about whose responsibility it is to implement each task or action, and also to have someone to monitor that responsibility. So as heads of sixth form, you may well be responsible for the majority of the tasks within a priority, but you might also want to include your tutors there, possibly heads of department, so that they're taking on responsibilities and you might be monitoring the progress perhaps that they're making along with those tasks. It's very often your line manager that will be monitoring the work that's done, possibly even the head teacher directly. And I know of quite a few schools where they have a designated governor for post-16 learning, and they may well take on that responsibility as well, and take part in implementing the plan wherever possible. Something I learned really early on in my development planning is to consider the incurred costs when you're actually planning in the first place, before you get to the point of implementation, especially if specific resources or professional learning is required. In this context, schools have found that it can be really helpful to be co-constructing and sharing priorities and plans with other heads of sixth, whether that's in a network or perhaps an alliance of schools that you might be a member of, and possibly even looking at sharing the costs and the burden perhaps of implementing that plan. And that's certainly worked really nicely for some schools here in North Wales. Finally, it's important to bear in mind that the plan itself should be a live document. It can be amended, it can be updated as required. But the most important thing is that it does lead to development, and for that reason, that it's clear, specific and manageable for everyone who's working together to achieve the priorities is going to be really, really important. Okay, so on this slide, I've got a suggestion of a template for you. Now, it may be similar to what you already use, it might be very different, it doesn't mean that it's better. But for any of you who perhaps are just about starting on your development plan journeys, this might be a useful template for you to be using. And we are going to use this template for our activity now. I'm going to be popping you into breakout rooms very, very shortly. You've heard enough from me already, I know. The key aspects that we've just outlined there are within those boxes, if you like, to try and guide perhaps the plan into ensuring that all the elements are included to ensure it's as effective a plan as possible. And hopefully that means then that it's easier to implement and should then help you to realise the priority that you're looking at. I am just going to pop in a second, I'll pop a couple of links into the chat. These documents that I'm going to share with you now, there are Welsh and English versions. They're already in the class materials folder in our team. So if you wanted to access them in future, they're there for you, but I'll pop them into a link into the chat so that you can use them in your breakout room as well in a second. So this is what I'm going to ask you to do, please. I'm going to ask you then to spend some time looking at development planning. I'm going to provide you with a fabricated self-evaluation to guide your discussions perhaps on how you would then use any self-evaluation information you've collected and how that might then drive you into writing up your improvement plan and also thinking about how you might implement that. We're going to be in groups again for about 20 minutes or so. And as with the previous breakout room, I'd be really grateful if you could nominate a spokesperson, please. We'll come back together at the end of the 20 minutes and we'll listen to each other's findings just for the 10 minutes then leading up to the coffee break that I'm sure you're all very much looking forward to already. And what I'd like you to do really is to have a go at transferring the information that's in the self-evaluation document into the development plan and see how you go. What's easy, what's not so easy about it? Is it something that you're already doing in school? And just take some time, hopefully, to be able to share the process between you. So this is a copy for you of the fabricated self-evaluation. Again, if you want to take a quick screenshot, you'd be welcome to. But as I said, I will pop the links into the chat as well. What we've got are 4 aspects here that will need your attention and considered perhaps development for each of them, please. And I'll share them, I think, between the groups, if that's okay. We can take them in order. So group 1, if you could perhaps look at that first aspect there, looking at boys underperforming and perhaps lacking engagement, and how perhaps you can look at that and what you might put as a priority and what steps you might take to try and address that issue. The second group then, if you could go for bullet point number 2, please. This is looking at subjects changing or dropping subjects, or even possibly dropping out of sixth form altogether very early on and perhaps later into that first term in September. What is there that can be done around that? How could that be addressed and what steps might you take? So that's for group 2, please. There's a third issue there to deal with, looking at use of departmental data and how heads of department and teachers themselves are looking at addressing any underachievement. It can be really tough, can't it? Very often as heads of sixth form, that kind of worry is directed to you, but working with the heads of department and ensuring heads of department are clear about their responsibility there. So I'd love group 3, please, to look at that and how they might go about implementing a development plan around that. And then group 4, could you pick up please on the wellbeing and resilience challenges mentioned in bullet point number 4 there, something that's really pertinent to our sixth forms at the moment, coming out of COVID and back into preparing fully for external exams and so on. Perhaps you could think about how we might go about addressing those challenges. Group 5, I'm going to ask you to pick one and have a go at it, whichever you prefer. We'll look forward to hearing what you've got. So 20 minutes then, please. I'll pop the links in the chat, but they're there for you in the class materials under session 2 in Teams as well. Lovely, thank you very much. Well, thank you all for taking that time in the breakout. And as I said, once we've all fed back, we'll take a break for coffee as well. Just a couple of things before we perhaps start listening to the groups. A couple of you mentioned that you didn't have access to the Teams group that we've got for this particular training. You might see, if you have a look in the chat now, Emma has just pasted in the code that you can use to join the team if you need it. So do feel free to copy and paste that if you need to. And in the same way, I think perhaps a couple of you hadn't received the emails and perhaps are struggling with the use of the team. If any of you think that we might need your hub email, if you haven't provided us with your hub email, do feel free to email your hub email address over to Emma, or pop it in the chat now if it's easier for you. And we'll make sure that we add that then, so that all the correspondence come via your hub address, hopefully to make things a little bit easier for you to be receiving everything and make sure that everything is working. OK then, so we'll go over to group 1 if we may. Hopefully group 1 you've got a spokesperson. How did the process of transferring the self-evaluation into a development plan go for you for priority number 1? That was looking at the boys underachieving and perhaps lack of engagement from the boys as well. Is there anyone who would be happy to just feed back on that for me?
I think I was in group 1, Mari, I think.
Diolch yn fawr, Llyn.
O'n i ddim quite yn siŵr, we weren't quite sure. We couldn't.
Ond dwi'n ddiolchgar i ti beth bynnag, nawn ni dderbyn dy gais di. Diolch yn fawr.
The first thing we talked about how we'd had a bit of the short straw with the first question, yes. Because I think it's probably one of the toughest ones, and yes. I think we've known that for years and years and years, and no matter who we ask, we're not getting much help from anybody there, because I'm not sure anybody does know the answer. But we talked a lot about, you know, the maturity of these boys, these young men. Is it just a simple psychological factor that they're not mature enough to deal with the ideas. Then we looked a bit more about the masculinity side, and we talked about how if at any one point you're looking in your sixth form library, it's 80 to 90% girls, females working, isn't it? Do the boys seeing it as being something negative, a weakness to be working? Is it admitting that they need to do the work? There's just so many variables there with what we did, isn't it? And it's really difficult to find sort of any sort of quantitative data about this, because they're very reluctant to tell us why they're feeling disengaged. They're not sharing things with us, which is part of the problem in the first place. And they're such a difficult group to attack. We did talk about one thing. I trialed something last year with Vesper. I know lots of people are aware of Vesper, but we're trialing our digital platform. And what that let me do is, anybody knows of Vesper, you know, we can use it for questioning and mentoring, but we used it as a filtering system to get some data. And so we did the vision bit, and then we filtered it. We looked at the 10 bottom vision levels, and we noticed it was all, well, mainly the young lads who mainly did BTEC sports. You know, because I don't think their timetable was very, very full. They weren't being particularly challenged by the course at the point. So we kind of took them aside. We found out what they wanted to do, found out why they were a bit disengaged. They didn't tell us much, but they all loved sports. So we just put something into place which didn't cost as much and didn't take much effort. We just put a level 1 coaching thing in place during registration. It was just a Davarni, you know, thing where they just learned how to be a referee, and it was level 1. It really wasn't hard. We actually taught it ourselves, you know, just to get the group up and running. But we found they got a bit more engaged. They were getting something out of it. They were seeing the point of mentoring, and then we were being sneaky and sneaking more mentoring in as well, you know, so we were mentoring by stealth there as well. We've got them all back, and we weren't thinking we would. I think that was the problem. We thought we tend to lose them, don't we? But they came back. So that was quite a simple intervention we did. It worked with them. It didn't work with another group of young lads we tried to do, but it's something that I think you can do. We need to find out what they like, and we need to give them more opportunities to doing what they like, because they don't like school. They know they need to be there. Mum and dad make them be there, but they need to like it. And it could have been a one-off, but it worked with us for that small cohort.
Well, diolch yn ofnadwy I chi. A llongyfarchiadau, if it's worked with that one particular cohort, and I think it's really interesting that you're picking up perhaps on a lot of the discussion that you had perhaps in that first breakout room this morning, is that the pupil voice really has guided you into looking at how exactly you were going to do something about it. So it's clearly worked really well. Llongyfarchiadau Llŷr, and thank you for sharing that. I'm very grateful. I'll move on to group 2, please. If you could give us some idea of how you got on.
That's M. Saunders' group.
Thank you, Helen.
And also we've got H. Macmillan, R. Creamer.
We talked about different things. So first of all, maybe we talked about how important it is for all of this to start in year 11. So if they're changing subjects in the sixth form, we need to make sure that we're implementing things in year 11, just to make sure that they're really thinking about these different courses before even starting them in year 12. So we talked about things like taster days, where we give them taster lessons, one-on-one interviews, so maybe using ourselves as heads of sixth form as well as the deputy head and head to run these interviews and kind of have a chat with them about maybe what they want to do during year 12, and maybe also think about what's realistic, because maybe at the moment we've got pupils that are doing subjects and maybe they're not, they shouldn't maybe be doing. So we looked at as well maybe giving careers advice to different pupils. So this again happening in year 11, so that they've got maybe something that they want to follow then in year 12. We've also we also talked about maybe input from different subjects in year 11, maybe getting a pupil panel together as well from year 12 or 13 to kind of talk about different subjects, and you know how much of a jump it is from GCSE to A level, and what's involved within the subject. And something we tend to do here is trying to push that they start with 4 subjects. And then they've got the flexibility then to be able to drop a subject. You know, this morning already I've had one pupil wanting to drop a subject. You know, it is late. I wouldn't allow somebody to change a subject, but if they've got 4 in the first place, they've got that flexibility to kind of drop one if needs be.
Yeah, and the pathway, as you say, is so important, isn't it, to make sure that people are on that right pathway from the beginning. And I know a lot of schools are working in a similar manner with picking up 4, so that the flexibility is there perhaps to drop 1. Thank you ever so much. I'm really grateful.
Problem.
Group 3 wedyn, os gwelwch chi'n dda. If there's a representative from Group 3, please. This was supporting departmental views on underachievement.
I think that's us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So the remit was that we were looking at data gathering and recognising that some departments are addressing underachievement, whereas others aren't. We all agreed that that is something we experience, and we were able to do some really good practice in sharing here, and we were given a flow chart. I've forgotten who managed to share the flow chart. I've forgotten the name, sorry, but it was brilliant. I did, right. So we were given a flow chart because I think the concern is making sure that every department is consistent with their managing of intervention and support. So to avoid the jumping ahead in occasions where sometimes they overlook the sort of the flow chart or the hierarchy of what to do, if part of the action was to devise a simple flow chart that could be then shared with heads of departments and SLT as a guidance on how to manage then the low level concerns, but then also recognizing when the next step is then more intervention, and obviously the sixth form then will take on the more serious cases. And the flow chart was brilliant because obviously it's about the teacher managing that classroom initially and what they need to do to be able to deal with the low level. And then the next step is if all those actions have been addressed but nothing has improved, it then moves on to the head of department or the leader of that area. And it works in that way, which is such a simple idea and can actually be incredibly effective. But sometimes I think we all agreed that there probably did exist at some point, but it needs that reminder, it's that reboost on a regular basis to say, this is the structure, this is what we need to do. So using the criteria of how to address this, the action is to present a flow chart. The responsibility is the head of department and the line manager, SLT, to be able to make sure that it's simple and can be then shared with the heads of departments. There's obviously a deadline. Obviously, it's crucial to get it done as soon as possible. So if you can initiate it as quickly as you can, you then have got a system in place that is effective. There's no cost to it, and it's monitored on a regular basis. So when you have a data drop, you can monitor then the process as well. So I've walked away with an amazing flow chart. So thank you for that.
And thank you for sharing on Delit's request as well. I'm very grateful for that.
Sorry, I posted. It's not mine. I won't take credit for it. I just
Thank you ever so much for that. Absolutely. And it's that consistency of approach. And as you say, it does need a reminder on a regular basis. Thank you very much. So flow chart in the chat there for those of you who want to pick it up. Group 4, please. You were looking at the wellbeing and resilience challenges that might face our learners.
Hi, yeah. So we looked at this section and really we you know, this was something I talked about with my first group a lot about resilience. You know, it's definitely a concern at the minute, and a number of us had mentioned about, you know, number of people swapping subjects. I think that's often a good indicator, you know, they're not sticking with things long enough to try them. So obviously a concern. We sort of backtracked a little bit to year 11 and, you know, and thought about our transition processes and having that key information there being really important. So, you know, a number of good ideas. I know lots of us will have open evenings and some good ideas about maybe delivering parts of an A-level lesson to potential pupils to give them a sense of what the subject will be like, you know, so that there are no shocks when they're going in. Because I think that big gap, isn't it, between year 11 into year 12 is often shocker, and that can affect the resilience. So just making sure that really there's key information. We talked about having not just pupils on board, but parents on board as well, and making them aware of the expectations and the reality. And there was some talk about having parental and student lessons, so parents are aware of the kind of work that they would be doing as well. And then we, you know, in terms of our action, you know, those information evenings, looking at that transition, but also, you know, that close monitoring, attendance being a key factor with any concerns there. And the well-being, you know, we had so many ideas around, you know, well-being surveys and pupil voice, pupil panels, you know, how often that would be done, you know, so it's just about being able to identify. Sorry, I think I've got a fire alarm going off now. Just I'll wait until my feet are getting warm and no,
thank you ever so much, Jo. I'm very grateful, and as you say, I think with wellbeing, it's something that so many schools have had to really invest in over the last 2 years anyway. It's never ending, the ideas, and it's important then to just make sure that what we're implementing is suitable for our particular setting, isn't it? We do what's right for our kids in a way. I'm going to invite the spokesperson for group number 5 to add anything that perhaps they might want to add from their particular discussions, if they're different perhaps to the groups that we've already heard.
Yeah, hi. We discussed point 2 because it's something we've seen in our school a lot was subject changes and dropout rates. We talked about very similar things to what group 2 talked about with subject taster sessions, perhaps having bridging units, making them sort of compulsory basically when they come in for enrolment, so they get a flavour and idea of what that subject is like before they start, and so they're prepared for it. Making sure that we've seen a lot of dropout, particularly in maths and science subjects in our schools, and making sure that we've got the right curriculum, basically, that perhaps, you know, where there are the traditional A levels for sciences, that we do look to offer other things for students and promote them well, because sometimes there can be a little bit of a downsides from parents, I suppose, sometimes with these, because they don't come under the A level umbrella. So work to do possibly in year 11 to show the value of those subjects and that curriculum as well. So that whole transition process, we did discuss similar things, and again, resilience came up a lot. That, you know, in the first month of doing A levels, just because you perhaps got an A or even an A star at GCSE doesn't mean you're going to just jump straight into working at that level, and doing some work with students, possibly through the VESPA program, through form tutors, to understand that, you know, it isn't going to come easy to have that resilience, and sometimes perhaps failing isn't a bad thing. Absolutely, it can be a good thing and a positive thing. So we discussed that as well. So work to do in that area as well.
Thank you ever so much, and can I thank you all. I'm hoping that you've got something out of these discussions as well, looking at the development planning, that link perhaps between the self-evaluation and the development plan itself, and hopefully some ideas have been shared and you've had a chance to speak to one another. We are going to break now for coffee. We'll take a 15-minute break, so if you could all be back online for 11 o'clock, please, I'd be very grateful. But do feel free now to take a bit of a break. Thank you ever so much.
Okay, well, 11 o'clock has come, so welcome back post coffee break. I hope you had a nice blend there. Now we're slightly behind time, but we can catch up. So this slot now, we look at Learn a Voice, and we've got a lovely video which lasts about 10 minutes. I did intend on doing some breakout rooms following that. I think we've had a little change of plan, but what I would like you to do is to think about how you're gathering, as you watch the video, obviously take on board how you gather Learn a Voice, and really sort of what impact have you seen. We've heard from Llŷr or Ledi talking about maybe the disengaged BTEC Sport boys and how that had a real impact. And I'd be very interested following the video to know, well, who else has done what, how you've gathered the information, and where have you seen really impactful outcomes. And that'd be really valuable for us to share and to hear from colleagues, I think. So Sian, are you ready to play the video for us, please?
Yeah, I'll do that now for you.
Lovely, thank you.
Do you see that?
There we go, Sian. Brilliant, thank you.
Okay.
So like Diane said, today I'm going to be going through effective pupil voice in sixth form and what we do in my school. Just to give you some background, my job role currently is Key Stage 5 Pastoral and Standards. I'm also in charge of whole school self-evaluation and development planning, which I also then do whole school quality assurance as a result of that. So pupil voice across the whole school is one of my responsibilities. The SEN framework has changed. It used to not really include sixth form, but now there's quite a bit of emphasis on sixth form. So gathering key evidence for inspection and improvements that involve learning walks, pupil voice, work scrutiny and lesson observations are a big thing in sixth form now that you need to focus on and that you need to look at. I do feel that previously kind of sixth form was their own kind of entity and people wouldn't really focus on these things, but I think it is really important that they should be treated equally in the evidence that you're gathering as you do with the whole school. So I think one of the key areas that I focus on is I do create a sixth form development plan which is unique to sixth form. By creating a development plan, I can actually identify areas of development and target the pupil voice that I do on that. So it's not just based on anything, it's actually linked to areas within sixth form that we have identified really as areas of weakness. And there's two ways that we do pupil voice. The first is sixth form as a whole cohort, which we do on Google Forms. We always allow pupils, there's always a question which allows them to upload work to back up what they're saying, but by doing that you're giving everyone a voice in sixth form. But then also we do groups of learners like a normal pupil voice would be. We usually have between 8 and 15, but we always blend work scrutiny in with our pupil voice. It's never a standalone pupil voice. We always include, call it file scrutiny at sixth form, but it's just to really understand what they're finding that works really well and what needs to be improved. I feel by having a development plan, the pupil voice becomes really specific in order to identify and implement improvement, because quite often if you're just doing a general pupil voice on loads of different questions, you're not really identifying one area. It becomes not as meaningful and not as relevant then to you and you to improve. So obviously when we do our pupil voice, we focus on the key questions that Estyn would look at. So we always try and look at questions that involve standards, well-being, teaching and learning, care, support and guidance. We never really focus on key question 5, which is leadership, because obviously the way that we see it is if leadership is effective, then all those things would work naturally. So we never question leadership specifically, we focus on them with the pupils. This is an example then of last year's development plan with us. We identified that what we were finding were pupils maybe didn't really know where they were. We had some really excellent subjects that were coming out with excellent results, our maths, our science. So we explored kind of what they were doing and what was working well with them, and it was pretty obvious really, but they were assessing regularly, pupils were getting regular feedback, and then they were able to act on that, and that was working well, but wasn't necessarily happening across the whole sixth form. So we implemented this into our development plan, where we wanted to create assessment weeks every half term to track pupil progress and then put relevant support in place for that. So we started doing that, but we really needed to find out what the pupils were thinking, how they were finding it. Were they finding this valuable? Because we were changing the way we were assessing across the whole sixth form. So we wanted to identify what they were thinking and if they were finding it valuable. So to do this, we created some of the questions. They were open questions that focused around the areas, like I said, on each key question. So do you know your targets? You know, how much you enjoy your courses? We kind of went into general questions across the 4 key questions, which then led to answering if that was working, if our assessment weeks were working, and how the pupils felt about it. From that, we've kind of gone down. We always write reports from pupil voice, always. I always write a report, and it's a detailed report, and that's great. But what we were finding is when you sometimes write too much, pupils and staff maybe don't engage with it. So what we started doing was creating pupil voice in a kind of a booklet, which was really easy to use, really easy to understand, and the pupils were also involved in creating that. So once we collate the evidence, we put it into a report and we pick up the key strengths and areas of development, and we ended up with something like this. And every pupil voice we do now, just done a recent one on blended learning, because obviously that's the big thing at the moment, we create a booklet, which is like a little teacher guide, which really identifies what, because sometimes we need to boost our teachers as well, things are going really well, and what the pupils really think about sixth form. So on the first page, what they said, what they were finding that worked really well. But then we went down into the nitty-gritty, which made it very simple to understand instead of a big report. So what pupils like, very simple, and what pupils don't feel that work really well. Because, you know, I obviously as head of sixth form, but also as a teacher, the teacher sixth form, and there were things that were coming out that I would have thought, oh yeah, this is a good practice, but actually pupils weren't engaged with it and they didn't like it. And I picked quite a lot of things out of here from my own practice that I felt that I could improve. Like I said, by doing this was given back to our students, and it was given to every pupil in sixth form to have a read, and if there was anything they didn't agree with, they came back to me. So even though it was done with a group of 15, everyone had a voice on it, so everyone was given an opportunity to read it and to agree or disagree with it. So this has actually been done across everyone has had a say in this. Once completed, I always share it with the sixth form to ensure they feel that, you know, it's a true reflection of everyone's opinions. I then send it out to all staff. This is discussed then in departmental meetings, and I think this is key. Sometimes you do a lot of work, and I think being in charge of quality assurance across the school, I feel quite passionately that if you're going to do something, it needs to be meaningful and you need to act upon it. So ensuring that once you've done a pupil voice and you gather the findings, yes, be positive, what's working well, but yes, identify areas of improvement, but ensure that those departments are then going back to look at it and look at their own practice, and is there anything they need to change. So once we've done it, the following departmental meeting, it is on the agenda, and then areas of improvement are expected to be acted upon if they are relevant to that department, and they are identified then in the minutes for that department's meeting. The areas of development that we look at, like I said, you know, we've done the what pupils don't like. There's quite a few of them, but for a whole school perspective, I only pick out one or two things that I'm expecting everyone to do, because if you're giving people hundreds of things to improve, it's never going to improve. So from a whole school perspective, I look at one or two things that everyone needs to ensure they're doing, but then the general areas of improvement are identified in the guide that everyone can have a read of, and if they feel then that's personal to them, they can make those improvements in their own individual teaching. I think what's key though is always to review and evaluate those developmental areas. So at the end of the year, we review and we evaluate the development plan and the areas that are identified. So from the pupil voice, it fed in quite well to what we were doing. You know, assessment weeks that were introduced last year came out as a strength, and the pupils really enjoyed them. So we have continued with them this year. In fact, we've included one more assessment week compared to what we had last year because the pupils are so positive about it. Target setting was a strength in general, but we found that from the pupil voice, not all subjects are providing meaningful targets. So from that, we didn't really have that in place last year. So we have now introduced personalised targets reviews that come in place after every assessment week. And then we're planning to review this then in February after assessment week 3 to see how the individual targets of improvement are going to go. So I think it's a cycle really. Using pupil voice is really powerful. And obviously, you know, the assessment weeks are going well, but it was identified from that, you know, the targets sometimes weren't completely personal. So we've introduced that, but I will review that with the pupils, like I said, in February. And if they feel that that's working, great. And if they don't, we look at other areas. You know, I think in sixth form pupils are, you know, old enough to kind of have an opinion on their own learning. And if you work with them, you can have a really positive impact. So thank you for listening. That's kind of an overview of what we've done. And like I said, you know, those guides that we have created, we've now created 4 over the last.
Thank you, Sian. Thanks for that. And hopefully you can see why we've shared the video of Bethan and QEH. You know, logical, I've written down engaging, impactful, really simple thread through, and a lot of buying at the heart of it. But definitely not a sort of a tick box exercise. I think, you know, she says several times that it's meaningful. And I don't know, Matt, if you're still there, but Matt from Fitzalan, not too dissimilar, I don't think. You might want to expand on it, but not too dissimilar from what you described when you talked about what you discussed in the breakout room when you were looking at self-evaluation. Would you agree, Matt?
Yeah, definitely. Very consistent in terms of getting, I think, a strength. I think I had a meeting with someone the other day, and they said, what do they say? Your worst customer is your best source of advice. So, like speaking to pupils, you get such a clearer picture of, as I say, what they think is going well and how they can improve. I think it's vital that we utilise that to improve our standards and outcomes.
Yeah, I like that little saying, and I also think, you know, if you hear something enough times, then there's got to be some sort of relevance to it, hasn't there, as well? You know, you might not like what you're hearing, but if it's coming through in spades, then take note, isn't it? Can anybody else share? Thank you, Matt. Can anybody else share any ways that they gather Learner Voice, or where you've seen real impact in what you've done? As I said, Llŷr has done. Is anybody else who's willing to share with us all?
Hiya. On at a subject level, we have pupil subject leaders within every faculty and every subject within that, and they meet with the directors of faculties each half term or each term, depending on how many lessons they're allocated, and they get, you know, like pupil subject leader sort of badges to wear on their tie and things like that. And for lower school, that works really well. But what we have seen work quite well is to give the sixth form like senior roles within that, you know, within that setup, so that they can take on responsibility for like leading discussions about subjects, and then they can also filter in like the differences between like sixth form study and things like that. So it's given them the an insight into sort of further education sort of subjects as well. So that's been quite successful for us, rather than having like whole school or you know, generic kind of pupil voice, having real subject specific. So it's broken down into year groups as well. So it's really quite focused feedback, and then the you know, the faculty development plans then have to reflect that, and the, you know, the curriculum changes with regards to, you know, what feedback the pupil subject leaders give them.
Oh, thank you. That's a real, you know, something good there for us to take on board, and you can imagine the power of the amount of pupils then who, with subject expertise, can help lower down. Really does engage as well, and gives them a sense of, you know, we talked about in the first session, didn't we, how we can get buy-in from our post-16 cohort. We're giving them those added responsibilities, making them feel that they're so valued that they've got a role to play lower down. I think is really empowering for them. I'm acutely aware the 11:15 has arrived very quickly again, which sort of leads us very sharply on to Sian and those difficult conversations, and a lot of what's been talked about is about, you know, is the power of change and how we can do that. And I think Sian's going on to see how we can influence others and take those decisions forwards within school. Thank you, Sian.
Diolch, Gareth. Thank you very much indeed. I think we just need to share the PowerPoint. Emma, would you mind just putting the PowerPoint back up for us, please, if you don't mind?
No problem.
Yeah, I think, yeah, as leaders of post-16, just to sort of echo Gareth's comments there, really, you have such an ability and freedom to do Learner Voice, you know, whether it's across subjects, whether it's across the whole of your A-level provision in college, whether it's your subject area in particular. But it's such a powerful tool. It's such a gold nugget, because they are your key customers, they are your key stakeholders, and you know, they will give a completely different dimension potentially to what you think is the current situation. So yeah, absolutely to embraced horizontally and vertically. Right, we're going to change tack a bit now, and no more breakout rooms, but I'm going to get you to do a bit of writing, please, to gain your feedback. Okay, so we said that we'd speak about developing effective collaboration with managers and staff, because again, you know, day in, day out, you will be dealing with so many different people across your organization in the interest of your learners. And, you know, the way we interact is going to be really important, you know, because that could make or break the relationship and what you're trying to achieve, you know. And we interact differently with family, friends, and in the work setting. If just looking at this particular slide, here's some theory around social styles. You know, the theorists say that everyone can be categorized into one of 4 social styles. You know, which one are you is the question. A driver, someone who's strong-willed, assertive, determined to keep going, you know, whatever the weather, emotionally controlled. Are you someone who's expressive, outgoing, intense, dramatic, or, you know, amiable, comfortable, low risk, easygoing and supportive? Maybe that's you. Or analytical, you know, you need the detail. You can't possibly, you know, take the next step until all the I's have been dotted, the T's have been crossed, and you know the ins and outs. Let's, you know, have a look in a bit more detail of what we mean by that. Okay, so I hope you can see this. This sort of unpacks a little bit those headings there in terms of driver. For example, a driver is very much, you know, someone who, you know, is fast acting, very task focused, plans very carefully, very decisive, you know, and just basically wants to get the job done. You know, unlike someone who's expressive, you know, outgoing, enthusiastic, quite creative, entrepreneurial, you know, dislikes routine and complexity. As I said, again, someone who just wants to get on with what needs doing. And then we have, you know, colleagues who are amiable and analytical, you know, and I'm sure that, you know, day in, day out in your organizations, you will be working with a wide range of individuals in that capacity. So, you know, thinking about those key headings there, you know, do you know, what category you'd fall into? You might fall into more than one. You might be a combination of the 2. This is probably something that most of us never even think about. But let's have a little go at maybe having a think about, and I'll put the previous slide back up in a minute, but if I just put into the slide, I'd like you to just complete this Menti little survey, which I'll put in the chat now. Here we go. And I'll display it up on the board, and let's see what everybody thinks in terms of their own social styles. So, you know, are you more task orientated or more people orientated? You know, do you tend to ask more questions, or you are more comfortable telling others what to do? Let's just put this previous slide back on up on the presentation now. Could you all click that link, please? And I'm going to share the results of that little very 2-minute survey. So click the link and just put in your viewpoint, please. We'll start to see the results as they come up. Interesting. Can everybody see this, colleagues? Could
yeah, perfect. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you so much. Oh, this is becoming very interesting, don't you think? I don't know if people are familiar with the Menti presentation here, but the majority of responses are the bigger letters on the page. So far, it looks as if the majority of people here today are expressive, amiable, analytical, and we've got some drivers as well. Okay, very interesting. A nice combination, I would say. Lovely. Has everybody managed to fill that out? Okay, so why is this important? Why are we talking about that here today? I think because there's so many people that you do work with across the board, and maybe just pop into the chat what different job roles in your college, in your sixth form, do you have to work with in order to get to where you want to be, to achieve what you want to achieve, and focusing very specifically on learner achievement and progress. Just pop into the chat the different types of job roles that you have to work with in your organisation. I notice it's starting to change a little bit as more people have added. Analytical has become the top one. Amiable, expressive. Still driver is just about there, but analytical seems to be a key feature now. So we'll have to be careful, colleagues. We've got some very analytical people in our midst.
Sean, there's just a question in the chat there that says, do you mean different people? Just a question.
Yeah, different job roles. Just pop into the chat the different job roles that you work with in order to get your job done. Is it the ALN coordinator? Is it your, thanks, Chris, senior leadership, line managers, heads of faculty, admin teams, wellbeing teams, safeguarding teams, site staff? Absolutely, if you're trying to organise something. Data managers, yes, absolutely. Good communication skills, essential with students, staff, parents, SLT, external agencies, absolutely. What else do we have here? Social workers, counselling roles. Yes, again, safeguarding, data managers, SLT, HODs, tutors, SMT tutors, Alenkos, HODs, parents. Yeah, absolutely. Colleagues from college, is there anybody else that's different to what's already been listed there that you would need to work with? I think, schools and colleges working together. So for colleges, certainly in terms of transition, school pupils moving from school to a college environment, I would have thought that, relationships and partnerships and communications with schools would be essential as well. Okay, thanks everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Lots of, different types of people. So actually, collaboration skills, thanks Phil for mentioning that. Yeah, other schools as you work across your sixth form provision. So a lot. Learner services, yes, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I think you can see the point I'm trying to make, really. How you interact with other people is critical, really. So I think depending on how you've identified yourself, it's important that you understand other people as well and how you need to be. For example, if someone is very analytical and likes to know all the facts beforehand, then it's important that you are prepared for that and that you are empathetic and responsive to that notion. Likewise, depending on what type of person you are, if you're a driver, fast acting, task focused, other people may not be similar to you, really, so you may need to just be aware of your social style, and just, if necessary, be in control of how you're going to engage with different people. You know, for amiable people, slow in decision making, you need to factor that in. You know, you may need to offer them more time and more support to get the job done, really, because you are going to rely so much on other people to get to where you want to be. Certainly when it comes to supporting learners in terms of their achievement, their progress. You know, some of you will have, whether it's now or in the future, responsibility for performance, you know, whether that's performance across A levels, performance, you know, in a sixth form capacity. But the only way you're going to get there is to work in harmony and in true collaboration with colleagues. And so the little exercise that we have just done, I hope that that will give you a little bit of food for thought, really, in terms of, you know, how do I need to interact with this individual? Because the last thing we want to do is, you know, to come into any conflict whatsoever with colleagues in order to not achieve what we want to achieve. So I'm just going to sort of, in order to highlight that, I'm just going to show you another short video to again, to give you hopefully some little food for thought and maybe bring to life exactly what we've just been talking about. So if you bear with me for 2 seconds, I shall play another little video.
The second type of conflict that we can look at is differences in styles. Conflict often happens because people have differing preferences on how to get things done. For example, one person may want to get the work done quickly, that is, they're a task-oriented type person, and get on to the next thing as fast as possible, while another person is more concerned about making sure that everyone has a say in how the work gets done. They're a more people-oriented person. You can hose down a lot of potential conflicts when you're trained in how to understand and successfully navigate your way through style differences. And make no mistake, style differences generally lead to personality conflicts. In fact, here's an example of a style conflict that was fast looking like a personality conflict. I was recently coaching a client who was complaining about a colleague who'd taken 5 minutes to run his eyes over her report that she'd spent way more than 20 hours compiling, and then he immediately started pointing out to her the things that she hadn't got quite right. Boy, was she angry. She said to me, how dare he glance over it for 5 minutes and then provide an opinion on it? He hardly has enough background to make such broad sweeping judgment. He's impossible. I'm going to have to tell my boss that I just cannot work with him. After hearing this, I reminded her of the DISC webinar she'd recently attended with me, and she got it straight away that this was a style conflict. Her preferred style, which is steadiness, is to take time to think things through before making a well-considered comment and/or decision. Whereas his preferred style, which is dominating, means he makes fast decisions and offers opinions freely. Once we'd taken it back to differences in style, she saw a way to discuss with him his responses to her work. But more importantly, how they could use each other's styles to work more effectively together. So the third type of conflict in the work.
Okay, a bit random in terms of the video, but I think what I wanted to just do is sort of emphasize that style approach, that social style, because as leaders, whatever the capacity you're a leader in, you know, whether it's the head of sixth form, head of A levels, head of your department, you know, and you all have, you know, many more years of career development in front of you. Something as subtle as this is actually really important, you know, how you communicate. Because how often have you been in a situation where people have just handled a situation so wrong and it's caused havoc. So, you know, it really is important that you get that bit right. I don't know, at this stage, if we just take a pause, does anybody have any comments really in terms of experiences of how a situation has gone not as well as can be expected because of the way somebody has handled a situation? Does anybody want to volunteer any experiences that they've had over the years or even recently? Where things, as I said, have not gone to plan because of the way in which people have interacted.
Just moving on there. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for all your contributions today. Fantastic as always, and just as effective, I think, online as in the room in October. So thanks so much. Hopefully you feel a little bit more informed. You've had nice discussions today on self-evaluation, development planning, learner voice, which seems strong throughout, which is fantastic already. And then just to consider those learning styles going forward. As you can see on the screen, we've got the QR codes there. So if you could please, for the remaining 5 minutes, complete the evaluation for day 2. That would be wonderful. Any problems with scanning that, please let me know. And then we've also got our coaching offer there as well. We had 10 people have taken up that offer already. And if you have taken up that offer, we will be contacting you soon to assign you with a coach and get that underway. If anybody else hadn't previously filled out the coaching offer, then please take that opportunity, fill out the form, and we'll assign a coach to you very, very shortly, as we said. Apart from that, we'll give you a little bit of quiet now for 5 minutes to fill out that evaluation. Just a reminder that our next session is in 2023, so it's Thursday, the 26th of January, and I'll send another reminder just before that, at the beginning of that week, to remind everybody to join that session. So we'll just give you a few minutes. Please fill out evaluation for day 2. Your feedback is absolutely vital to us developing the programme. And if anybody else would like to access one-to-one coaching offer, then the form is there for you as well.